Welcome into the final Climate Friday newsletter of the month of February. Hard to believe February's already come and gone. Now, the one thing that we haven't seen this month is measurable snowfall. You may have wondered, where has winter been? And in this week's Climate Friday, we are going to answer that question, talk about our historic snowfall deficit, and also, will we see a tide change in March? And finally, some wintry weather. We'll answer those questions and delve into the science behind it. Thanks for tuning in on YouTube and on WTOL 11+. Let's delve deep into this February and where the snow has been, starting things off with this historic snowfall deficit. I want to begin with the February warmth that has been so unusual this month so far. At the time of this recording, we have seen 9 days this month with 50-degree temperature readings, and Thursday marking the 9th day as we've seen some unseasonably mild conditions. That includes a 4-day-in-a-row stretch that we had from February 12th to 15th that brought us those unseasonably warm temperatures. We've had 62-degree warmth as well on February 9th and 15th, and some folks south of Toledo have seen the 60s on more occasions than just that. But this warmth is more characteristic of springtime than the month of February. Now, high temperature records not only impacting northwest Ohio and southeastern Michigan, but also a good portion of the United States has seen anomalously warm temperatures this month, and that is what we call the fingerprint of climate change. These high temperature records are getting more common and low temperatures a little bit less common. So far during the month of February across the country, over 1,100 high temperature records have been set. If we look back across the past year, the past 365 days, hard to even fathom, but the thermometer has been broken over 37,000 times. That is the number of high temperature records that occurred across the country in the past 365 days. Now, in addition to the warm weather, we really have not seen much in the way of snowfall. If February were to end today, it would go down as the least snowy on record, and there is a good chance that we will set the record for the least amount of snow in Toledo's history. So let's start things off by talking about, what does a normal February bring, and how has this February been anything but normal? Now, February is typically the second snowiest month of the year, falling just shy of January. A typical February brings us 10.2 inches of accumulation. Last year we had some good February snow. 2021, we had some good February snow. This year, not so much. An average temperature during the month of February is at 30 degrees, and I pointed out just how commonplace those 50-degree warm days have been. This February, anything but normal. So far, zero measurable snow accumulation at Toledo Express Airport, and right now, as it stands, the least snowy February that we have ever seen since those weather observations started getting taken is ½ an inch of snowfall. This so far is our least snowy on record, and right now that award goes to 1899 and also 1987. And if we don't get ½ an inch of snow, 2023 is going to take the cake for the least amount of February snow that we have ever seen. So what is the snowiest February? You may remember this one from recent memory. February of 2015 tops the list for the most snow that we've ever seen in the month of February, and that one brought over 2 feet of snow accumulation, a whopping 25.3 inches of snowfall. This year, just a trace. In other words, not even enough to measure with a ruler, just a few snowflakes during the month of February. Looking at some of those other historically low-end snowfall months, 1987 and 1899 each brought ½ an inch of snow accumulation. 1949 didn't record much snow either, just 0.6 of an inch, and 1931 just shy of 1 inch. And right now we're topping that list. And if you look at that WTOL 11 weather forecast, things are not looking good for snowfall during the final days of February. What about the most snowfall in February? If you're a snow lover, or perhaps you just bought a new snow blower this winter that hasn't gotten much use, look at that. 2015 brought us over 2 feet of snow accumulation. 2011, also in recent memory, brought us over 2 feet. 1900, 25.1 inches. Another recent snow in the month of February, we've had a couple, 2015, 2011, and 2010. All of those recent Februaries brought us over 2 feet of snowpack, and 2008 also on that list as well. Boy, what a difference this February has been with just a trace of accumulation. If you look back on the last 2 years, we had some big-time snowfall events. During February of 2021, we had some late-season snowfall with 22.7 inches of accumulation, and in February 2022, just shy of 20 inches of snowfall. Those were pretty historic as well. In 2021, that was our 7th snowiest February ever recorded at Toledo Express Airport. And just last year, that was actually the 11th snowiest ever recorded. Now, of course, we're going to make history this year, but for the other reason, for having no measurable snowfall during the month of February. I guess we were due for one, but certainly a trace of snow in February is uncanny and unusual. Now, one of the impacts we've also talked about in Climate Friday is the ice cover on Lake Erie. And you may be wondering what ice at this point. Ice fishing season's been just about non-existent. Normally, in late February and early March, we are near the peak of ice cover, with 45% of the entire Great Lakes covered in ice. Right now, Great Lakes ice cover is just 10%, and that is way below normal. That number includes Lake Erie, Lake Superior, Lake Michigan, all of them, and we are way below normal. What about Lake Erie in particular? Normally, in late February and early March, the red line, that shows you our normal ice cover for this time of year. We are nearing the peak of ice, and on Lake Erie in particular, we see peak ice that is over 60% this time of year as we reach the end days of winter and the start of spring. Now, the black line, that shows you where we have traveled this year as far as that Lake Erie ice is concerned. We did see a brief spike at the end of January and start of February, but our lake ice has subsequently dropped down in a big way, plummeting by the end of February, and we are essentially close to zero ice on Lake Erie due to just how mild it has been lately. You'll notice we fall way below that red line, far below where we should be on that Lake Erie ice cover. Only briefly at the end of December did we spike above the red line, and you may remember that cold snap right before Christmas, that did spike the Lake Erie ice ever so slightly. January brought us a big thaw. We saw that brief little uptick, and now we are headed back down near zero in the ice department. We often look at satellite imagery or a bird's eye view of the lake and the Great Lakes region from outer space. In our most recent satellite view, you can see the clear waters of the lake with that greenish tint to it. And of course, that white color shows you clouds visible from outer space. But the one thing missing from the lake is the ice. Lake Erie ice is essentially zero at this point due to how mild it has been lately. So recapping the entire winter thus far, our biggest snowstorm, and storm may deserve some quotes if you're a snow lover and you like a little more. We have only seen 4.7 inches out of the biggest system of the year, and that one happened at the latter half of January. A brief cool down with that heavy, wet snow accumulating. Looking at the month of January and February, each of them has been incredibly mild. January was a whopping 7.6 degrees warmer than normal, and that made it the 7th warmest January on record. Looking at those overnight low temperatures, of course, this is partly responsible for that lack of Lake Erie ice. 4th warmest overnight lows. Oftentimes it is the frigid overnight lows that help form and develop ice, but due to how mild January was, including the 4th warmest overnight lows on record, that made ice formation a little bit difficult. Now, we have not had any measurable snowfall this month, and February is 6 degrees warmer than normal so far, and it's likely to follow suit of the month of January, going down as an incredibly warm one. Now, last but not least in this edition of Climate Friday newsletter, we've talked also about the early spring bloom and some of those signs of spring that folks across Northwest Ohio have already started to see. The red color on this map shows you where an early spring bloom is already taking place. Now, we're still a little bit too early being in the month of February, but to the south of the Ohio River, folks in Kentucky and Tennessee are already seeing flowers come up. That red color shows you where the spring bloom is 2 to even 3 weeks earlier than normal. Across the entire southeastern contiguous United States, right along that Gulf Coast, they have already seen flowers come up and signs of spring that are way earlier than they should be. And again, that vivid red, 20 days early, the fingerprint of climate change. We have seen that spring bloom happen 2, 3, even up to 4 weeks earlier than normal due to the warm temperatures that we have seen across the country. In next week's edition of Climate Friday newsletter, we'll talk about the full recap of the month of February, and that'll be our first edition of the month of March. Hope you have a good rest of your week, and I'll see you next Friday with the latest.